Hello, today is September 15th, 2015. We're meeting today with Mr. Raymond Ernest to talk about his World War II experiences. My name is Brad Hoops. I'm with the Northern Colorado Veterans History Project. Welcome, Ray, and thanks for sitting down today to tell your story. Let's start out, if we could. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your date of birth, where you're born, a little bit about your family.
Okay, I was born at Dalton in 1927, and I was one of the 8 children that Otto and Mary Ernest.
And what order were you in that line?
I was, well, to start with, my older brother was Richard, then Bob, Dominic, Mary Lou, my sister, myself, Patrick, my younger brother, and then there was Cecilia and Dorothy. That should be 8.
Okay.
My mother passed away when I was about 6 or 7. It was in 1934,
Oh boy.
and that left Dad with 8 kids, and the crops were just about no.
Oh.
A lot of dust, dry weather, grasshoppers, and no money. My uncle lived west of Dalton. He had packed up and moved to Oregon. And my dad, I remember him saying it several times, that he didn't have money enough to move his family, or we would have been gone too.
How do you think he made it? How do you think he managed with all that going against him?
Well, he had a quarter section of ground, and I remember Dad saying to the banker, he says, "You can have it. I can't do anything out there anymore." The banker says, "Why don't you just stay there?" He says, "You can do just as much or more than anybody else." So that's what happened. And I remember dust bowls when I'd go to school and come back. In the evening, we could write our name on the kitchen table in the dust.
Oh boy.
And things just went that way. And like I say, my mother died in 34, and Dad remarried in 1938 to an aunt of mine, his sister-in-law, which would be no blood relative. And in 1939, the crops weren't very good. I remember that year. 1940, my 2 older brothers was out of high school, and they had bought a Chevrolet truck and started trucking. Well, they made ends meet, I guess, and about that time, December 7th came along. I was in high school at the time, and my older brother went to the Army. He was drafted.
Do you remember where you were that day and what you were thinking when you heard about Pearl Harbor?
Well, the actual day, I don't remember too much about that. I do remember there was a train wreck at the time there at Gurley, just a short ways down the road. And I remember going to that. And then the next day at school, we all was in the auditorium and heard President Roosevelt on the radio. So everybody knows about what he said. And things started booming about that time. Crops happened to be getting a little better, and the prices was going up, and everybody was in the Army by then. And I got out of high school in 1954. 45, excuse me. 45. I went to the draft board like everybody. Draft board gave me 30 days to report after I took a physical.
Now, being on the farm, could you've gotten an agricultural deferment?
No, I couldn't at that time because my 2 brothers were still there. My 2 younger, not my 2 younger brothers, but Bob and Dom were there, and my dad, and that was taking it.
Yeah.
And I don't think at that time they had farm deferments until a little later.
Oh, okay.
But I went through high school, got out of high school, and draft board gave me 30 days. And I thought, well, heck, why wait 30 days? Let's get this over with. So I went to Sydney and signed up to Army recruiter, and that was in Dalton, in Sydney. And he says, I'll pick you up in Dalton this afternoon. We'll go to Scotts Bluff. So that's what happened. That evening we got to Scotts Bluff and we filled out a couple of papers and got on a train.
That quick? Did you have a chance to put your affairs in order and say your goodbyes?
I was past my physical and I was eligible.
Wow. Now, I'm sorry to interrupt, but of all the service branches, how'd you come to choose the Army?
Well, I didn't know too much about the Navy because I didn't know anybody. And,
right.
My two uncles was in the Army. My older brother was in the Army.
Okay.
And the next morning after I signed up in Sydney, I was in Omaha the next morning.
Wow.
And it wasn't by no airplane, it was by a train. And that train had wood seats and they were straight. They didn't even have slant backs on them. Just all wood, no upholstery whatsoever. And we tried sleeping the night, and they stopped every wide spot in the road. Anyway, we took another physical in Omaha, and I passed that. And by then it was a weekend, so we stayed in Omaha in Fort Crook, which is Bellevue, and that's, what do they call it now? That's where I can't think of it. Anyway, it's not Fort Crook. And then we went to Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. We were sworn in the Army there, and that's where I have raised my hand and said, I do, or whatever. And we stayed there for a week or so until all the paperwork caught up with us, and we got some shots and got some clothes. And we got a train and went to Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland. That was a long train ride there. We had all our duffel bags and everything in the cars, and it was very crowded. We had no bunks to sleep on, just set up and sleep. Took probably 2 days. Got to Maryland and done some more paperwork, and that was a mess.
In what way?
Pardon?
It was a mess in what way?
Well, it was mud. There was mud, snow, and then it had rain. And barracks was terrible. They were all empty, and they had to bring in some mattresses and everything to have us stay over. And we got the bunks all set up and everything. And that evening or that night, we had to go by the supply room. They threw a rifle at us, an M1 rifle, covered with a heavy coat of cosmoline.
Right.
And have that cleaned in the morning, ready for inspection. Well, what do we have? Well, nothing but our towel maybe to wipe them off and clean them. We didn't have nothing to clean them with. We got them cleaned up some way. And we started on our basic training. And like I say, it was cold and wet, snow and rain. And those barracks that we lived in were just one story. They were set up on cement blocks, and they were just made out of cardboard, you might say,
right.
Tar paper like.
Yeah.
3 pot-bellied stoves in the middle, and it was cold. And nothing to burn in them stoves but wet coal, and it didn't burn very good. So we took turns firing those stoves, kept going. And by then the chow was terrible. Didn't have enough, wasn't very good. The cooks had to cook on wood or coal stoves, and they were smoking and a lot of ashes, and it was dirty.
Oh.
They wore whites to start with, but after a day or so, it was black.
Hmm.
And we started our basic training, and some guys were starting to get sick. Well, that was reasonable. And like I say, we didn't have very much chow. And some of these guys, you know, there's always one in the crowd to figure out something. And they got the night KPs to put some food outside the door at night. And we'd go over to the mess hall and get it, come back and eat it. Well, a loaf of bread or two, some oranges maybe, jar of orange marmalade, what I can't eat today. And we survived. One night, there was some raw eggs sitting outside the door. Well, some of those guys might say they were from New York, Pennsylvania, wherever. They could figure out anything. How are we going to fix raw eggs? So like I say, some guys were sleeping at that time and their mess kits was in their barrack bag. Get his mess kit, we would cook those eggs in there on those old coal stoves. Well, that was a disaster. We survived, we got by, put his mess kit back in his bag, and he didn't know the difference until the next day, because at that time we didn't have dishes or we didn't have trays. We ate out over mess kits, and we did that for several months.
Huh.
And that was another disaster. Outside of the mess hall, there was 4 tubs. The first one was to put your scraps in that you couldn't eat. The second and third and fourth one was to dip them in to wash your mess kits. Well, we ate in battalion mess halls, which was 12 to 1,400 troops. Well, after a couple of hundred guys ahead of you, those tubs of hot water wasn't very hot, and they were awful greasy.
Mm.
Well, that probably brought on some more sickness. Anyway, that went on for a while, and we were all getting sick. So at that time, somebody come up with the idea to put our shelter halves up between our bunks. Our bunks, head to foot, they were alternated, and put up our shelter half to keep from coughing on the next guy, and he wouldn't be coughing on you. The bunks were only 18 inches apart, so that didn't work too well. About that time, they quarantined the training center. Nobody could leave or come in there. And I wound up in the hospital, along with dozens of other guys. And after a while, the hospital was full. The halls were full of beds, patients, and still getting sick. Guys were still getting sick. So by then it was getting towards spring, and we were shipped, a bunch of us were shipped to Fort Sam Houston.
Now, this is spring of 46?
Yes.
Okay.
In the spring of 46.
Now, when did you went in the summer of 45 then?
No, it was in February of 46.
Okay, so you graduated in December then?
No, I was home the summer of 45.
Oh, okay. And then
I wasn't 18 until
okay. Gotcha.
45.
Okay.
And just a couple of months after I was 18, I was drafted.
Gotcha. Okay.
Well, anyway, they shipped a bunch of us to Fort Sam Houston, to the hospital there, Brooke General Hospital, they called it. And we were there for a month or so, and we were treated like kings there. We had good food, good bunks, good clean place, and the Red Cross took care of us, a lot of our things, and they even provided our way to the rodeo out there. A number of nights we went out to the rodeo, and that was the place where I first seen Mexican bullfighters.
Oh, okay.
They were strictly from Mexico, and they would fight those bulls with their blankets. And I thought that was pretty cool.
Well,
After a while, we were shipped back to Maryland to finish our basic training. Now, at the same time, there was a number of guys got medical discharges. I happened to be one that didn't get a medical. So I went back to basic training in Aberdeen, and we found out that the guys that we were with, they shipped out to Germany. Okay, well, we finished our basic training.
So had you not gotten sick, you would have with that class shipped out to Germany then for the occupation forces?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And
Well, how was basic training? How was it for you going from civilian life into military life? Was that much of an adjustment for you?
yes, I was very, very homesick.
Mm.
I'd have given anything if I could have went home, and I had it in the back of my mind, but I knew better because they always taught us, and that was one of their routine things. Never go AWOL or leave the army.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure, like most of your generation, growing up, you hadn't really ever traveled too far away from home.
No,
You know.
no, I had never been away from home.
Yeah.
Maybe to the neighbor's kid overnight, but that'd be one night and then back home.
Oh,
again.
boy, yeah, that must have been a hell of an
Oh,
adjustment.
that homesickness was very serious.
Huh. And on top of that too, I mean, here you're halfway across the country. You're meeting people from the South, from the East Coast. I mean, different
Yeah.
breeds of people.
That was one of the first things that everybody asked, where are you from? Where are you from? South Carolina, Kentucky, Georgia, Pennsylvania,
Mm-hmm.
Boston, New York. I'm from Nebraska. Where's Nebraska? I mean, at that time, those kids weren't very educated. Some of them probably would never hardly go to school.
Right.
And that didn't help matters.
Hmm.
Very homesick.
Yeah. Wow.
And okay, we finished basic training. That would be in the spring of '46. One day we went on a hike out through the Maryland woods, which those woods we went through yesterday reminded me of them.
Hmm.
On bivouac. No, I'll take that back. We went on a hike out there about 6 or 8 or 10 miles, and it was raining all that time, full field pack, no raincoats, and we were wet. The only thing was not wet was our billfold, and we kept that on our helmets on top of our head. We get home late that night, or home back to the barracks that night late. 4 or 5 o'clock the next morning, there was a convoy of 6x6 sitting out in front. We bailed in them and headed for APG, Virginia. So that's what we did. We was sopping wet, bailed in them trucks, full field packs and everything. And we had a police escort through Baltimore, right on through Washington, D.C., right on down to AP Hill, Virginia. And that's where we took our bivouac. And we were out there, and the weather was pretty decent. We dug foxholes and done everything else, slept in our pup tents, and we was there a while, and done everything we was supposed to, and headed back through Baltimore, Washington, D.C., Baltimore, Aberdeen. And about that time, basic training for myself was over with. So then what did we do? We waited around a while, I got orders to report to such and such company, and I became a drill instructor.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Fresh out of basic.
Huh.
That was something, I didn't mind that. That was better than basic training.
Well, you must have done very well at basic to be selected as a drill sergeant then.
Well, I was a private at the time,
Yeah.
and they gave us a temporary corporal stripes.
Huh.
And those guys, like I say, there's some of them from the hill country out
Yeah.
of Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, and wherever. Connecticut, Baltimore, Massachusetts, and Philadelphia, wherever.
Uh-huh.
And some of those guys didn't know their right from their left. And they tried teaching those guys the left foot and the right foot, right flank, left flank, column right, left, and all that. Oh, anyway, the guys that was really bolos, what we called bolos, the guys that didn't catch on real quick, would put rocks in their pockets on one side or the other, so they could remember this is where the rocks, that must be the left foot, or vice versa. We got through that all right, and I have the company picture, and it's about, I'd say about 40 to 42 inches wide, about that high, and they have all those pictures, all their names on it.
Huh.
And that was in November of '46. I have the company commander and our cadre, what they called cadre, and I'm in that picture, and I'm in both pictures. And well, in the meantime, I was on Company CQ one time. That's in charge of quarters. You're military, aren't you? Okay, company has what they call a CQ. You're in charge of quarters overnight, from about midnight till in the morning. You sit there in their office or answer the telephone or anything else that happens. So I was sitting there about midnight one night. Here comes the company commander. Lieutenant French was his name. And he says, you go over to the mess hall and get me a egg sandwich. I'm hungry. Yes, sir. So I goes over there, and he had been out on the night. He was about half shot. So I got the mess out of the KPs or some cook over there to get him an egg sandwich. He came back and ate it. Next morning, I didn't pay much attention. He says, you get the troops up an hour early in the morning. Yes, sir. So that's what I did, and I caught hell for that. It didn't amount to anything, but they all commented on it. And the next morning, I see Lieutenant French had his same necktie on. It had yellow egg stained down his necktie. He must have looked in the mirror or something. Well, that was just the funny part of it. Okay, basic training was over for those guys. And I was kind of out of a job right then. It was getting close to Christmas. Some guys got home for Christmas. I didn't get to go home for Christmas. I probably could have, but
Oh, boy.
what the heck, a long train ride back and forth, and only be a week probably. So I and some other guys stayed there, which reminds me, and I haven't thought of it for a long time, but I knew a guy from Greeley, Colorado. I met him, I didn't really know him, but I remember talking to him. Bob Davis was his name, and the reason I remember that, I had a cousin by that name, Bob Davis. He's from Greeley. Well, anyway, that's all of that one.
So it had to be tough. You're talking about homesickness. It had to be particularly tough around the holidays, I would imagine.
Well, I was getting over it a little bit by...
So you didn't get a furlough once you got out of basic before you went on?
I never got a furlough period.
Really? Oh, huh.
I wasn't ever home until I got out.
I'll be darned.
Anyway, it was getting close to Christmas, and all those other guys shipped out that I knew, and find a few other guys was there, and spent Christmas there. And about that time, I got orders to ship out to Fort Ord, California. So I and umpteen other guys and the top sergeant, first sergeant, I think he was from our, no, I don't know. Anyway, there was a first sergeant with us. And we boarded a train in Washington, D.C. and headed west. We stopped in every cow town along the road. And stopped in Chicago, changed trains, and went on to California. Well, when that train went through Sidney, Nebraska, that's where I got off, and I called home. And about that time, the train was starting to go, so I had to leave. I bailed onto the train.
So close.
Yeah.
Oh.
And we went on to California. It took me about, and I know for sure, it was either 5 days and 4 nights or 4 days and 5 nights to get to California.
Wow.
Okay, we got out to Fort Ord. Now what are we going to do? We're going to the Pacific or what? Nobody knew. I don't think the Army knew. So I got a temporary job driving the colonel around in his Jeep. Just around the camp. And we go to town once in a while, and then I'd sit there in his office and read a book. Okay, let's go. So I'd bail in the Jeep and meet him at the door, and away we'd go. And of course, that was just a temporary job. About that time, there was a whole bunch of us got a chance to take a communication course that was in field telephone, where they'd roll out, is that my phone? I think it was, felt like it. We roll out miles of telephone wires out through the woods. Hook up switchboards, field telephones, everything was wire.
Yeah, right, right.
And then there's somebody go along and cut the wires here, and they cut them over there. We have to patch them. And to this day, I still know how to tie those knots in that field telephone. You tie a square knot, and then put what they call a seizing wire down through it, and wire it on. Anyway, we do that. And we had a lot of fun doing that. And we crawled poles. Had poles out there, and we crawl up one side, turn around, go back down the other side. We done that for a while. I have a certificate where I finished that course. And about that time, there wasn't a whole lot going on. It was kind of quiet. And there was a big service club, USO service club there at Fort Ord. It was out on the Monterey Bay, overlooking the bay. And if anybody was ever there, they would remember it because it was nice and big. It had a bar in one end of it. And about every Saturday night or every so often they had a big dance, had a big band dance. And of course, there weren't many girls around the Army camp. So they got buses to go to the surrounding towns and pick up busloads of girls, bring them in, dance. Time comes and take them home. Well, I happen to know the one bus driver, and his name was Walker, R-A or R-E Walker. He says, why don't you come with me and help me? Okay. So that's what we did. We went over to Salinas and Monterey, a couple other towns out there, maybe just 2, I don't remember, and bring those girls home. And my job was to walk the girls from the bus to their door, each one of them. Busload of them. There wasn't much sleep that night. And, that was all USO sponsored, so there was no messing around. And about that time, I got paid. So I sent a lot of my money home and only kept a couple dollars because I didn't have to buy anything. And about that time I got orders to go to Coral Gables, Florida.
Really?
Another 4 days,
Yeah.
5 nights we were there in the train. So we boarded the train and went on down through LA, across Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, Louisiana, into Florida. And when I got to Florida, I was kind of by myself for some reason. I had to report different place. I don't remember. Anyway, what the hell did I do in a train terminal in Miami? So I went to the travel agency and showed them my orders. Yeah, they called so-and-so and they come and got me. I went out to what they call Pratt General Hospital. That was a great big, about 16, 18 floors high in the middle of it, and then it had lower sections of it. And that was a big general hospital. Pratt General Hospital, they called it. And I had a choice, and that's the first time they ever give me a choice to what to do. I either work in the kitchen on regular hours or go to work on the hospital floor. Well, being in KP, I didn't want any part of the kitchen, which I could back up a ways if you don't mind.
No, yeah, please do.
I'll back up onto this. When I was basic training in Aberdeen, I and another guy was on night KP, which was to keep the coal fires burning from the cook stoves and get some chow ready for the next day. Well, we had 400 pounds of potatoes and 30 dozen cases of eggs to prepare. Now, are we going to peel all of the potatoes?
Mm.
Well, they happen to have a potato peeler, which would peel about 10 or 20 pounds at a time. So we got through the 400 pounds of potatoes and put them in big pots, kettles, put them in the cooler, and start on the eggs. 630 dozen eggs, or 630 dozen cases of eggs.
Wow.
Now to break those eggs, we had to break them in a big pot, which is about 20-gallon aluminum pots. And after a while, we could break an egg in each hand at the same time.
Huh. Wow.
Oh, there goes some shells. That's all right. There was a lot of egg shells in there.
Yeah.
If you try to do it at the same time. Well, you had to. You've been all night doing it. Oh, boy. And then this guy I was with was from Texas. Great big old boy from Texas. And he said, "Do you see anything like it?" And I said, "No." And he would go out to the dining area of that mess hall, and he says, "Cockroaches, 10, chut." You turn the light switch on, and those tables would just move with cockroaches. You know what cockroaches are?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That was as part of I didn't miss.
Yeah.
Or I missed in that
Uh-huh.
basic training.
Hmm. So now you're down in Florida.
I'm done with training.
So you got on the decided to go to the hospital onto the hospital. Now, how did you get transferred down there? By testing, by request, or how did you end up in the medical?
I don't know. That's the Army. They just.
Yeah. So, like I said, you're down in Florida. You're in the medical. You had no idea how you ended up in.
I don't have any idea. That was just
Yeah.
part of the medical.
Yeah.
Or part of the Army. They just ship you around.
Right.
Do this. And at that time, the Army would, if they didn't have a cook, they would train it, whether you were a cook in civilian life or not. You could be a mechanic in civilian life, they'd make a cook out of you, or
Yeah,
vice
right,
versa.
yeah.
Well, anyway, they give me a choice to go to work on the floor, so I took the floor. And that hospital was a psychiatric hospital. That's where everybody was, all the patients were battle fatigued, all combat veterans. And we give them shock treatment. And that was very impressive, very, I can remember it real well. We'd get them, the doctor would weigh them, get them up on the table and hook up some wires to them. And the doctor would say, okay, watch them. You'd turn the electricity on and boom, they were out like a light. And at that time, they were completely unconscious and they would bounce. And jump, their muscles were just bouncing. They would have to hold them. It took 4 of us to hold them on the table. And about that time, they'd go limp. They're just like a dead person. So we take them out, roll them out on a cot, roll them out to their bunk, go to the next guy. And about the time we get through with them, they would be starting to come to. Well, we'd have to set them up and start pouring liquids in them because they would dehydrate very quick if they didn't. They were completely wet, just like they were in a shower. All their bedding, the sheets, pajamas, everything was just sopping wet. So we do all that, change them all, make their beds up. And we done that every day. And if that didn't work, or, well, I don't know about working, but some of the guys got shot of insulin, overdose of insulin, and right in their arm vein in their arm. That would do the same thing or put them out. Just boom, they were out. And they didn't have any belts. Their pajamas, all they had was pajamas. They didn't have any clothes. No belts, no shoestrings. Every meal they had was a spoon and a spoon only. No forks, no knives. And every door had a lock on it. Every door we went through, we unlocked, walked through it, and locked it. And I still have the key for that. It's a great big key about the size of your finger.
When I look back, I would think, here's this innocent, somewhat naive Nebraska farm boy. That whole experience had to be somewhat of a shock to you, I would think.
Yes, that's why I remember it so well. Yeah. And I was only 18. 19 at the time. And I hadn't been home away from home for a long time. Or home for a long time, too. So we done that for quite a while. And that was a big hospital. It was, like I say, it was probably 16 or 18 stories high.
Now, would you get any training, or was it purely on-the-job training, sort of?
It was on-the-job training.
Yeah.
There was nurses there, of course. They were trained, and a doctor or 2 every day. We were just on-the-job training. No, I didn't have any training for that, but I sure learned quick.
Yeah, I'll bet. Oh boy. Would you ever talk with any of the boys that?
Yes, after they come through, and they would be just as calm as could be. And I often thought to myself, why are they there? They were just as calm. We would play cards with them, play checkers, visit with them. Next morning, run them through again. Oh. And a lot of times they'd go out and play basketball, but it was in closed court. It was all under lock and key. We had to watch them. Every opening, where there's one of us sitting there, they wouldn't let them out of sight hardly. And we treated privates, captains, generals, whatever, didn't matter. And we did, I remember there was a couple of majors there.
Did they ever act up? Did you ever have any problems with any of them? I mean,
once in a while they would get to be a fight between the two guys. And I don't remember, I think I remember maybe once But the guys who was there before or with me, they said, yeah, we used to put them in the bathtub. We'd take a couple of sheets and wrap them up real tight with a couple of sheets, lay them in the bathtub and turn cold water, fill them up with cold water. That would cool them off. They wouldn't be wanting to fight then. Well, I don't know why. I guess that was legal.
Wow.
So, after a while, I guess the Army decided to turn that over to the VA. I thought that's what they did anyway. I'm trying to think of something else, but I think that's about it. We got orders to go to Percy Jones Hospital in Battle Creek, Michigan. So we all jumped on a train and headed north. Of course, that was down in Florida, south end of Florida. And it was warm, and all the train windows was open, no air conditioning. And we got up into Kentucky or Indiana. We had a cold front. That was in the May. I think it was May. It was the spring of the year. That was in May or spring. And a cold front. And boy, all of a sudden everybody was cold. And we went on up to Battle Creek, Michigan, and started working there.
Now, you went up as the whole hospital unit went up, or just?
No, there was probably a couple dozen of us. I don't know why.
Okay.
That's just what you didn't ask questions
Yeah,
anyway. You know, you just did what you was told. You didn't ask why. And I started working in the hospital there, and that was totally different. That was orthopedic.
Oh.
That's where the guys had their arms and legs off. Some of them was crutches, some of them was walking with a cane, some of them wheelchair, some of them was bedridden and traction and all that. And we waited on them, hand and foot, whatever they needed, we got. Their meals, their medication, books, served them snacks, and a lot of chocolate milk, and if they didn't drink it, we did. we were getting pretty well fed that way. And those guys was all combat veterans. And those guys always had a name for everything. They called those guys working there bedpan commandos. And to be a good bedpan commander, you had to carry a bedpan in one hand and eat with the other hand. Oh, I think most of us probably met the specifications. So, and that was real interesting.
Well, once again, I've got to imagine that had to be a shocking experience to see the condition of some of these guys.
Yes, it was.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, some of them was. And every once in a while in both hospitals, some of them would wake up fighting. We'd have to break that up. Yeah, but like I heard some guys say, we were 18, 19-year-old and we were bulletproof.
Yeah.
So, and after a while I got home then. And after riding all those trains, I decided to take a bus coming home. Got a Greyhound bus, and that's what I did.
Home from a furlough?
No, my time was up.
Oh, okay. Oh,
see, I enlisted for 18 months.
Oh, okay.
The Army had that special deal at that time,
okay.
and I grabbed it. I got home in 18 months. Well, I'd never had a furlough, and I was due for 45 days leave. So I came home then, rode a Greyhound bus. And before I got home, we got caught in a rainstorm, and the bus got wet. The engine on the bus got wet. Of course, they didn't have diesel. That was a gasoline engine. It got wet and quit. But the bus driver, he got his fire extinguisher out, dried it off, and we came on home. And a couple of years ago, which was about 2013, I was reading a story about Bob Dole. And he was in Italy, in northern Italy, in the spring of '45. And he was wounded real bad. He wound up in the hospital for 3 years. First year, he couldn't feed himself because of his wounds. And I found out then that he was in Percy Jones General Hospital at the same time I was. And I never to this day have found out whether he was there.
Right? Whether you took care of him or...
Yeah, maybe I did. I
yeah.
don't know.
Well, before we jump into your post-military years, I want to back up and just ask you a couple questions. Boy, you literally crisscrossed the country,
Yes.
all different corners of the country. That,
Yes.
like I said, keep going back to this small town Nebraska farm boy. It must have been. I know you were homesick, but at the same time, it must have been somewhat fascinating. I mean, being down in the warm weather of Florida and out on the coast of California.
Well, that weather didn't bother or didn't affect me, but that weather in Maryland, that's what cooked my goose.
Oh, is that right? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We were only about 100 yards off the Chesapeake Bay, and it was damp and it was cold.
Yeah.
I think it was probably the worst winter they had in years. So, and no overshoes. Our feet were wet constantly. And I may back up a little bit about this basic training. I was telling you about okay, while I was in basic training, or shortly after I was through there, I was still in Aberdeen, Maryland. I and a couple of other guys went to Baltimore to go roller skating. Well, I had never been on roller skates or hardly even a skating rink, but they knew how to do it, so we went to Baltimore, took a streetcar across town to someplace, I didn't know where, they knew where we were going, and they roller skating around just wild, and having a hell of a good time, and I was trying to stand up on them. Well, after a while, the rink closed up, and we went out to come home back to our room. No streetcars. Streetcars quit running for the night.
Oh.
No taxi cabs or nothing. How are we going to get home? So they started walking, and I was with them. There was 3 of us, and one guy was bigger and one guy was little, and I was walking down the street. I walked in the middle. It was dark, didn't know where in the hell I was going. And first thing we knew, we were in the part of town that was colored. Black part of town. Well, at that time, there was black and white parts of town.
Right.
And we just kept walking and walking and walking. I don't remember how we got home, but I guess we made it. But I always remembered that one too.
So while we're on the subject of basic training, when you look back on that, do you think you had an advantage being a farm boy over like the city boys in basic training as far as the physical aspect of it, or?
Well, I can't say that I did or didn't. The physical part of it didn't bother me, but it was just the conditions that we done it in.
Yeah.
Along with being so dirty, and homesick didn't help a bit. And I don't think I had, physically I didn't have any. My sickness was rheumatic fever.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
And to this day, I have scars from it.
Is that right?
Oh, yes. I have an artificial heart valve right now, and a pacemaker. I've had it for 15 years. And I got home, I went right back to work farming.
Is that right? Yeah. Yeah.
My family had a farm, and my brothers was there. My two of my brothers had farm deferments at that time, because after my brother Rich got home, and about that time the draft boards was after my two other brothers, but they had farm deferment because at that time food was just as important as
That's right.
ammunition,
Yeah, that's right.
or almost, I guess.
Yeah.
So they had farm deferments, plus one brother had a hernia, that didn't help, and they had farm deferments. And when I got home, they were all farming, and we all started farming together. And
Obviously, your two brothers that went off to serve, they made it back okay with no problems.
well, I had just the one.
Oh, just the one brother went off. Okay.
Yeah, he got home just before I left, and he was in Germany with Patton's Third Army.
Oh wow.
And he had met, I think he had met his duty over there,
Yeah.
because he never would talk about it. He told my son one time, he says, "Chris, I don't think you ever want to see what I have."
Oh wow.
He was an ambulance driver at one point in his career over there. And like I say, he never did talk about it, but he probably hauled the wounded and the dead.
Yeah.
And,
So was it nice to be back home after being away for that long? Were you glad to be back?
oh yes.
Yeah.
I didn't mind that hospital in either one of them, because in both hospitals we were issued a pair of whites every day. That was different than battle fatigue combat boots.
Yeah, right.
So.
And what would you guys do when you weren't on duty? What would you do for fun and to pass the time?
Well, in both hospitals I worked 12 hours a day.
Oh wow.
6 days a week.
Really? Oh boy.
So we didn't have too much time left over.
Yeah.
12 hours a day. Which reminds me, in Florida I worked 12 hours straight a day. I was on my feet all day long for about 99% of the time.
Yeah, right.
And it didn't bother me. We got to Michigan, it was on concrete floor, and we worked 4 hours on, 4 off, 4 on, 4 off. And after a certain length of time, I couldn't get my shoes on. My feet had swelled. I found out it was nothing but the concrete floor. Well, I don't remember how I got over that, but that's what it was. But back to my medical part, like I say, I had rheumatic fever, and I went back to duty. A good part of the guys got medical discharges, and I came home and started farming with my brothers and dad, and we enlarged our farms and done all right. And at the same time, every time I go to the doctor for a physical or where I was sick or whatever, he says, "You got a heart murmur." What's a heart murmur? Never heard of it. You come back next year or 6 months, whatever, come back, still got it. Well, that went on for 20 some years, I think, maybe longer. Anyway, probably in 1995, probably, the doctor there in Sydney says, "Why don't you go to Cheyenne?" He says, "There's a good cardiologist there." Okay, he knew him personally. So I went up there. "Oh, yeah, you can walk in. Come back, there's no problem." So that went on for a number of years. And once in a while I'd skip and make 2 years go back up. the summer of 2000, I told my wife, I said, I think I'll go to Cheyenne. I haven't been up there for a while. And see Dr. Davis. So I went up there by myself, and he says, and he had sent me home a number of times. So he's come back. I went up there in 2000. He says, yeah, you take these papers, go over to the hospital and check in. So that's what I did. And I was there 4 days. Dr. Davis and a number of other doctors and lab technicians and whoever all checked me out for 4 days. And, there's a Dr. Davis, David Silver came along. Says, I'm a heart surgeon. And, he says, I'll be doing your work on you. Okay. It didn't bother me because I think I was medicated. Anyway, went on a Friday, about July 17th to 18th, something like that. Went to the hospital, went to the operating room. Of course, I was sedated, you know, I didn't know what was coming or going. Friday, they worked me on Friday. Next thing I remember, I asked them, what day is today? It's Wednesday. I didn't know whether the lights were on or off for 4 days. I woke up with a mechanical heart valve and a pacemaker.
All related back to that fever you got in basic?
That's, I understand.
Yeah.
Rheumatic fever will
Yeah.
do that to your heart. And at that time, rheumatic fever was, boy, they couldn't treat it. No way treatment, I guess.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's what happened. I haven't had any trouble with my heart since then, but I've had a number of skin cancers since then. A number of them.
Being out in the fields. Huh?
Pardon?
From being out in the fields.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. So you went along for a long career in farming then, and
Yeah. Well, we farmed from 1946 until I'm still farming, but I don't do any work.
yeah. Well, as we start to wind down this interview, let's talk a little bit about family. Your wife and kids, grandkids.
Yeah, in 1958, I married Lyla Babb, Lyla Babb, and we have 4 children. One of them was stillborn, the first one. That was in '59. But anyway, we had 4 children. One of them is here. The other one is Julie, the youngest one. She's in Delta Junction, Alaska.
Oh wow.
She's been there for a number of years. Her husband retired from the Air Force, and he's working for the missile defense. Now I'm not sure what the correct name is, but it's something to do with these missiles, that's incoming missiles that they apparently shoot down or are capable. And he's got a very high-ranking job. I think it's classified pretty well because they don't talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I and my 4 brothers, we pooled all our efforts while we were farming from 1945, you might say, until probably, and we didn't stop all at once. We kind of phased out things, but it was probably roughly maybe 2000. We kind of went our own ways because we each had boys that wanted to go this way and that way. And Here is a picture of him.
We'll get this in here in a second. Yeah.
Okay. And
So you've got two girls and a son. The son took over the farm.
yes,
Uh-huh.
the other son, Larry, is the oldest one, and he was very, very capable of farming. And he had a trucking business where he hauled basically hay, straw into this part of the world, into Greeley, Fort Morgan, Eaton, wherever. And he became ill in about 1994, 95. It was kind of a gradual thing, a mental condition. And right now he's on disability. He's living in North Platte. He can't work. He can't physically. He probably could, but and my wife have 7 grandchildren and 4 great-grandkids.
Wow.
And back up just a little bit, I and my 4 brothers all farmed east of Dalton, within 10 miles of each other. Which is kind of unusual, I guess.
Yeah, you bet.
And we still do today.
Huh.
Of course, it's spread out just a little bit this way and that way.
Well,
Here's some of the tractors we used.
We'll start, like I said, Ray will start to wind down this interview. Through the years, did you ever keep in touch with any of the guys you served with, or is any sort of reunions, anything like that?
Yes, that's right, I did. I didn't ever go to a reunion because I was never attached to a permanent outfit like the 82nd Airborne.
Yeah, sure,
instance, or anything like that. It was always just a detachment of men. And that's what I got discharged from, was the 9951st TSU, 9951st Technical Unit, Surgeon General's Office, out of Battle Creek, Michigan. I think that's the way it reads on my discharge. Yes, there was one guy that I knew of when I was in the hospital. He was the next bunk, and we got pretty well acquainted. He was a strawberry farmer from Ohio. His name was Clarence Cole, and I still keep in touch with him.
Is that right? Yeah.
But last Christmas, his wife wrote the Christmas card and said that Clarence has dementia, and he's in a facility, and she's across the street in a different place. So, and while I was just out of the Army, I was out in the field working at home. It was about the middle of summer, and here comes a guy out there in a pickup or car or truck or something. And it was a guy I knew in the Army, and he was from Montana, which was practically home when you was in Aberdeen. Anyway, I didn't know him real well, but we had kept in touch there because he knew where I lived. He come out in the field and he wanted to know if I needed some wheat cut. He was a custom harvester.
Oh, okay.
Well, I didn't at that time because we had already contacted another party, and I don't think he ever came back. Now, whatever happened, I'm not sure. But we didn't keep in touch with him any, so.
Yeah.
I was surprised to see somebody there.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And another little instance was when I went to California from Maryland. I met a couple of guys out there that I trained in Aberdeen.
Oh, is that right?
I recognized them. I knew their name, and that's about all. And I think, if I remember, they were headed for Korea. But that was before the fighting started.
Okay. Yeah. Now, with your enlistment, did you have to have any sort of reserve requirements to go along with that?
No,
Oh, okay.
no, when I got out, I was out.
Oh, good. So there's
Yeah.
no chance of being recalled when Korea fired
No.
back. Okay.
Korea, I was 1V, class 1V, a veteran, so they didn't draft him.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah.
So that's,
Well, is there anything, as we, like I said, close down this interview, anything I didn't ask you that you wanted to talk about, or any other stories that kind of have floated to the top as we've been sitting here that you wanted to talk about? So that ideally, I know we probably only got the tip of the iceberg of your story, but ideally round it out as best we can, or do you think we, by and large, caught most of it?
I think we probably do. Okay, about those guys in Florida that had battle fatigue. I had read just recently where 98% of those guys that went in on Normandy, after 60 days, there was 98% of them had combat fatigue if they lived that long.
Wow.
98%, that's what I read just recent years. I didn't know it at the time.
Yeah, yeah.
And at the same time, I read there was 60,000 troops that was treated for battle fatigue at that time over the whole country.
Well, Ray, the last question I always like to ask with these interviews, when you look back on your time in the Army, did it affect your life, change your life, play a role in your life, or was it just simply a chapter in your life that you went through? How would you answer that?
Well, I think it was probably to an advantage in some points. I matured real fast. I went in as a raw country kid that hadn't been away from home and came home. Well, I might call myself a man. Plus the fact that I understood orders to not do anything wrong, because eventually you would pay for it. And well, I might reflect back to the basic training a little bit. Those guys that was training us when I was there was very, very strict. I remember one day I was out in formation, company formation, platoon of 48 or 50 men in platoon, and drill sergeant, a real tough old boy, I never could think of his name. He come up into me in front of me. "Soldier, you chewing gum?" "No." "Open your mouth." So I opened my mouth. He looked all around there. "If you were chewing gum, you would dig a hole 6 foot deep and bury it right here." And they meant it.
Huh.
So that was one of the things. You take orders and do what you're told and don't mess around.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, Ray, I want to thank you for sitting down today to tell your story today, but just as important, I want to thank you for your service to our country.
I appreciate that very much. Okay, the picture you see here is taken in 1954. It's 5 Ernest brothers and 1 nephew up on top of the tractor. That's Rich's nephew, or Rich's son. Rich is the oldest one. And then there's Bob. I'll take that back. It's Bob to the left, Rich, myself with a straw hat, Dom, and then Pat's over on the right side. Okay, that tractor in the background is an experimental Oliver Super GM 99. That's the name of it. Pat, my youngest brother there, the one on the right, he was in Korea, and we had sent him pictures of a tractor that my brother Bob had made up with a 3-cylinder Detroit diesel engine in it, which doubled the horsepower. Okay, well, when Pat was coming home from the Army, he was discharged in the East Coast, or someplace east, I think it was the East Coast. Anyway, he stopped in South Bend, Indiana, and went down to the Oliver factory where they made Oliver tractors, and got the tour in there, and he told one guy, says, why don't you build a big diesel tractor where the wheat farmers in western Nebraska and Kansas could utilize. Well, we are building one. So they went back and showed Pat the tractor that they were building. That was probably in January or February of '54. And he said, we're building this tractor up and we're going to ship it to California and test it out this summer. Pat says, you don't have to ship it clear to California. Drop it off at our place. We'll test it. So we corresponded with him for a couple of months, and come April 1st, or thereabouts, here was a tractor at our place. And they had all kinds of charts to fill out, and we were to run that tractor 1,000 hours that summer, and then they would come and get it, take it back, check it out, go into production. So that's what we did. We run the 5 of us, run that tractor around the clock all summer, every possible day we could. And we left our other tractor set as much as we could. And we got 1,000 hours on it from first part of April to the 1st of August. And they had a number of problems with that tractor. And they got them figured out, got them fixed. And then in the summer or spring of '55, they came out with a production model. And they sold bukus of those tractors in our country.
Is that right?
Lots and lots of them.
Huh.
And my brother has it, well, my brothers had 3 or 4 of them in '55, '56. And my brother Pat has one that I had as a 1955 model. He still has it.
Huh. Wow.
So,
and the very first model started out on your farm?
Pardon?
The very first model started out on your farm?
That's right.
I'll be darned. Huh.
So that's about it.
Hmm.
Okay, the picture you see here was taken in 2009. And that was the 2 tractors that we farmed. Myself, I have 2 sons farmed at that time. And since then we have sold that one to the right, the red one, that International, which I hated to see go because I liked the best of the 2. But we have replaced it with another more universal tractor, something we could, with a 3-point and power takeoff and that type of tractor.
Quite a change in the equipment from when you first started farming, huh?
Yes, that's right. Okay, the picture here you see here is the place where I grew up. My dad started that farm in 1920, And I had bought that from him in early 60s. I don't remember the exact year. But I've improved it. There's been a lot of changes. And I still live there today. And a lot of trees have been died off since then.
Yeah.
And like I say, that's their old home place. That's where the 8 of us grew up.
Hmm. Very nice.
Okay, this picture is my toy. I sure like that old truck. It's a 1945 Chevrolet 235 engine in it. It's original paint, original tarp, and I've had it since 1954. I've had it in a number of local small town parades. Got first prize every time.
Hmm.
And
Did you pick it up surplus back then, or
there's a couple of stories I like to tell about that. The first one is when I got out of the Army, the Army had a lot of surplus trucks, vehicles, all kinds of them. And they just told me to drive it home.
Oh, really?
I mean, that's the story.
Okay.
Very few people believe that. Anyway, I bought it from another fella in 1954, and I drove it, put a flatbed on it, fed cattle with it for a number of years, and kind of set it aside a little bit, and pulled a lot of people out of snowbanks and ditches and mud with it, because it's four-wheel drive. And then I got to thinking, I had it in a parade or two and got first prize. I'd like to have a box for that. And I had seen that box sitting in Geary, Nebraska for a number of years. And I asked the old boy if he wanted to sell it. Yeah, I'll sell it. Oh, that's too much money. So I went home. Every time I was in Geary, I would go by there. Damn, I'd like to have that box. So I bought probably in 2010 probably. I said, I'm going to go buy that box. So I went and bought it and put it on there. And of course the wood and the tarp was set inside. The box was outside. And that's why the color is a little different. And the tarp that's original tarp.
Hmm.
But the wood had been outside and it was all rotted. But I had enough wood to make new wood for it. So I got some wood for it. And I got the arches that make the arch over the top of it. I got those made in South Dakota out of solid oak wood. And I put it together and have a number of parade entries with it.
Huh. Wow.